A vicious billionaire leaves a beggar to die in the cold. Minutes later, he realizes who she really is. In the heart of a bustling city, where skyscrapers pierced the sky and wealth flowed like rivers, stood the empire of Victor Warren. With a net worth that rivaled small nations, Victor had built his fortune on a foundation of ruthlessness and intimidation. He believed himself untouchable, a king among men who could bend the world to his will with a snap of his fingers. As the sun set on another day of deals and acquisitions, Victor strode out of his office tower, his expensive suit shielding him from the biting cold. He barely noticed the hunched figure huddled in a doorway, a tattered blanket pulled tight around thin shoulders. The beggar, a woman named Sarah, looked up at him with pleading eyes, her hand outstretched in a silent request for help. Victor's lip curled in disgust. He had no time for the weak, the helpless, the forgotten. With a dismissive wave, he brushed past her, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement as he disappeared into the night. Little did he know that Sarah's tragic fate would soon become intertwined with his own, a catalyst for a transformation that would shake the very foundations of his empire. Across town, in a neighborhood that had seen better days, Maya Collins sat at her desk, poring over plans and proposals. She had once been like Sarah, lost and alone, but she had fought her way out of the darkness and now dedicated her life to helping others do the same. Maya led a movement, a group of passionate individuals who believed that change started with small acts of kindness. They worked tirelessly to transform their community, creating gardens in abandoned lots, opening a collective shop that provided necessities to those in need, and organizing projects that brought people together. As she looked out her window at the street below, Maya couldn't help but smile. The seeds they had planted were starting to grow, and she could feel the hope and resilience blossoming in the hearts of those around her. The news of Sarah's death hit the community hard. She had been a fixture on the streets, a gentle soul who always had a kind word or a smile to share. Maya felt the weight of her loss like a physical blow, but she knew that now was not the time for grief. It was time for action. She gathered her team, and together they began to plan. They would honor Sarah's memory by redoubling their efforts, by showing the world that even in the face of tragedy, hope could still flourish. As they worked, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's death was connected to something larger, something that went beyond the struggles of their small corner of the city. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to step into a battle that would test everything she believed in. Victor Warren sat in his penthouse office, sipping a glass of scotch as he watched the city lights twinkle below. He had built an empire on the backs of the weak, and he had no intention of letting anyone challenge his power. But even as he savored his success, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, a storm that would test the very foundations of his world. He had no idea that the catalyst for that storm was already in motion, a woman named Maya Collins who represented everything he despised: hope, compassion, and the strength of a united community. As the days turned into weeks, Maya and her team worked tirelessly to keep Sarah's memory alive. They organized vigils and memorials, shared stories of her kindness and generosity, and used her tragic death as a rallying cry for change. But even as they mourned, they knew that they couldn't let grief consume them. They had work to do, and they threw themselves into it with renewed energy and determination. They expanded their community garden, planting rows of vegetables and flowers that burst with color and life. They opened a new wing of their collective shop, offering job training and support to those who had lost their way. And they launched a mentorship program, pairing at-risk youth with caring adults who could guide them towards a brighter future. Through it all, Maya was their guiding light, a beacon of hope and resilience that inspired everyone around her. She worked tirelessly, pouring her heart and soul into every project, every interaction, every moment. And slowly but surely, their efforts began to bear fruit. The community started to change, to heal, to grow. People who had once felt lost and alone found purpose and connection, and the seeds of hope that Maya and her team had planted began to take root. But even as their movement gained momentum, Maya knew that they were up against powerful forces that would stop at nothing to maintain the status quo. She had heard whispers of Victor Warren, the billionaire who ruled the city with an iron fist, and she knew that he represented everything they were fighting against. She didn't seek him out, but fate had a way of bringing people together in unexpected ways. And when Victor's path finally crossed with Maya's, the collision would set in motion a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. It happened on a cold, rainy night when Maya was walking home from a late meeting. She was lost in thought, her mind swirling with ideas and plans, when she heard a commotion coming from a nearby alley. She cautiously approached, peering into the darkness, and what she saw made her blood run cold. There, huddled on the ground, was a young man, his face bruised and bloodied. And standing over him, his fists clenched and his eyes blazing with fury, was none other than Victor Warren himself. Maya didn't hesitate. She rushed forward, putting herself between Victor and the young man, her arms outstretched in a gesture of protection. "Stop," she cried, her voice ringing out in the empty alley. "Leave him alone." Victor's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Maya's with an intensity that made her shiver. For a moment, she thought he might strike her, but instead he took a step back, his lips curling into a sneer. "This doesn't concern you," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "Walk away now, and I'll forget this ever happened." But Maya stood her ground, her chin lifted in defiance. "No," she said firmly. "I won't let you hurt him." Victor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Maya thought he might lash out. But instead he let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said coldly. "I could destroy you with a snap of my fingers." Maya met his gaze unflinchingly, her voice steady and calm. "You may have power," she said quietly, "but you don't have strength. Not the kind that matters." With that, she turned her back on him, kneeling down to help the young man to his feet. Together, they limped out of the alley, leaving Victor standing alone in the darkness. The encounter with Victor only strengthened Maya's resolve. She knew that she had made a powerful enemy, but she also knew that she had something he didn't, the support and love of a community that would stop at nothing to protect its own. In the days that followed, Maya and her team redoubled their efforts. They organized rallies and protests, calling attention to the injustices that plagued their city. They reached out to other groups and organizations, building alliances and coalitions that stretched across the city. And through it all, they never forgot the power of small acts of kindness. They continued to tend their gardens and stock their collective shop, to mentor young people and care for the sick and the elderly. They knew that these tiny seeds of hope and compassion were the key to building a better world, one person at a time. As their movement grew, Maya began to hear whispers of other communities that were fighting the same battles, facing the same challenges. She reached out to them, forging connections and sharing resources, and slowly but surely, a network began to take shape. It was a network of hope and resilience, of people who refused to be beaten down by the darkness that surrounded them. And at its center was Maya, a woman who had once been lost and alone, but who now stood tall and proud, a beacon of light in a world that often felt so cold and unforgiving. But even as their movement gained strength, Maya knew that they were racing against the clock. Victor Warren's empire was vast and powerful, and he would stop at nothing to protect his interests. She had seen the signs, the subtle shifts in the political landscape that signaled a coming storm. Laws were being passed that made it harder for communities like theirs to organize and mobilize, and there were rumors of backroom deals and shadowy alliances that threatened to undermine everything they had worked so hard to build. Maya knew that they needed to act fast, to seize the momentum before it slipped away. And so she made a decision, one that would change the course of her life and the lives of everyone around her. She decided to run for office, to take the fight to the halls of power and give a voice to the forgotten and the marginalized. It was a daunting prospect, a path that would pit her against some of the most powerful forces in the city. But Maya had never been one to back down from a challenge. She had fought her way out of the darkness before, and she knew that with the support of her community, there was nothing she couldn't achieve. As Maya's campaign gained momentum, Victor Warren could no longer ignore the threat she posed to his empire. Initially, he had dismissed her as nothing more than a minor nuisance, a pesky fly that he could easily swat away with his vast resources and influence. However, as the weeks turned into months and Maya's message began to resonate with voters across the city, Victor felt the first stirrings of unease in the pit of his stomach. He watched with growing frustration as Maya's rallies drew larger and larger crowds, her words igniting a spark of hope in the hearts of those who had been forgotten and marginalized for far too long. Victor had built his empire on a foundation of fear and intimidation, and he wasn't accustomed to being challenged so openly, especially not by someone like Maya. Determined to crush her campaign before it could gain any further traction, Victor unleashed the full force of his resources against her. He hired teams of expensive lawyers and PR specialists to dig up dirt on Maya's past, looking for any weakness or scandal that he could exploit. He bought off politicians and media outlets, using his wealth and influence to spread lies and half-truths that painted Maya as a radical, a danger to the very fabric of society. But Maya refused to be intimidated by Victor's tactics. She met his attacks with grace and dignity, countering his lies with the truth of her own story and the stories of the people she fought for every day. She spoke of the struggles and hardships that she and so many others had faced, of the resilience and determination that had carried them through even the darkest of times. And slowly but surely, the tide began to turn in Maya's favor. People who had once been afraid to speak out against Victor and his ilk found their voices, rallying behind Maya and her vision of a city that worked for everyone, not just the wealthy and the powerful. They saw in her a leader who understood their struggles, who had walked in their shoes and fought the same battles that they faced every day. As the election drew near, the tension in the city reached a fever pitch. Victor grew increasingly desperate, resorting to ever more extreme tactics to hold onto his power. He threatened and intimidated voters, using his wealth and influence to suppress turnout in neighborhoods that he knew would support Maya. But in the end, it was the strength of Maya's community, the love and resilience that had been forged in the crucible of hardship and struggle, that carried her to victory. On election night, as the results poured in and it became clear that Maya had won by a landslide, the city erupted in celebration. In neighborhoods that had once been neglected and forgotten, people poured out into the streets, their faces lit up with joy and hope. They danced and sang and hugged each other tight, knowing that this was a moment that would be remembered for generations to come. And as Maya took the stage to deliver her acceptance speech, tears streaming down her face, she knew that their fight was only just beginning. But she also knew that with the love and support of her community behind her, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. In the days and weeks following Maya's historic victory, the city began to undergo a transformation unlike anything it had ever seen before. With Maya at the helm, a new spirit of hope and possibility seemed to infuse every corner of the metropolis, from the gleaming skyscrapers of the financial district to the humble streets of the forgotten neighborhoods. Laws were passed that protected the rights of workers and tenants, ensuring that everyone had access to fair wages and safe, affordable housing. Education and healthcare were made top priorities, with new programs and initiatives launched to support students and families from all walks of life. In every neighborhood, community gardens sprang up like wildflowers, transforming vacant lots and abandoned buildings into vibrant oases of green. Collective shops opened their doors, providing access to fresh, healthy food and other essential goods at prices that everyone could afford. Mentorship programs and job training initiatives gave hope and opportunity to those who had once been left behind, helping them to build the skills and confidence they needed to succeed in a rapidly changing world. And through it all, Maya was there, leading by example and inspiring others to follow in her footsteps. She worked tirelessly, often late into the night, meeting with community leaders and activists, listening to their concerns and ideas, and working together to find solutions to the challenges that faced the city. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be setbacks and challenges at every turn. But she also knew that they had something that Victor Warren and his ilk could never understand, the power of a community that stood together, that lifted each other up and refused to be beaten down. Maya drew strength from the people around her, from the countless acts of kindness and generosity that she witnessed every day. She saw it in the way that neighbors looked out for each other, bringing meals to those who were sick or struggling, or volunteering their time to help with community projects. She saw it in the way that young people stepped up to become leaders in their own right, organizing rallies and protests, using their voices to call attention to the injustices that still plagued the city. And she saw it in the way that people from all walks of life came together to support each other, breaking down the barriers of race and class and gender that had divided them for so long. As Maya looked out over the city that she loved, the city that had shaped her and made her who she was, she knew that there was no challenge they couldn't face, no obstacle they couldn't overcome, as long as they had each other. And with that knowledge, she pushed forward, more determined than ever to build a better world for all. Despite the incredible progress that had been made in the months since Maya's election, she knew that their work was far from over. Victor Warren may have been defeated at the ballot box, but he still had his wealth and his influence, and he wasn't about to give up without a fight. Holed up in his penthouse office, Victor brooded and schemed, his mind consumed with thoughts of revenge. He pored over every detail of Maya's life and work, looking for any weakness or vulnerability that he could exploit, any crack in her armor that he could use to bring her down. For weeks, he came up empty-handed, frustrated by Maya's seemingly unassailable integrity and the loyalty of those around her. But then, just when he was beginning to lose hope, he stumbled upon a lead that he thought might just be the key to his salvation. Victor had learned that Liam Hawkins, a young man who had once been one of his most promising employees, had defected to Maya's camp shortly after her election. He had been a rising star in Victor's organization, a ruthless and ambitious player who had seemed destined for greatness. But somewhere along the line, he had lost his way, seduced by Maya's vision of a more just and equitable world. Seeing an opportunity to strike at the heart of Maya's inner circle, Victor reached out to Liam, inviting him to a clandestine meeting at his office. Liam was initially reluctant, but Victor's powers of persuasion had always been formidable, and in the end, he had agreed to hear his former boss out. When Liam arrived at Victor's office, he found himself in the middle of a full-court press. Victor laid out his offer with a sense of quiet menace, promising Liam unimaginable wealth and power if he would only agree to turn against Maya and help bring her down. For a moment, Liam felt a flicker of temptation, remembering the thrill of his old life and the rush of adrenaline that came with wielding such immense influence. However, as he listened to Victor's increasingly desperate pitch, he realized that he had changed in ways that his former mentor could never understand. Through his work with Maya and her team, Liam had discovered a sense of purpose and fulfillment that he had never known before. He had seen firsthand the impact that their efforts were having on the lives of countless people across the city, and he knew that he could never turn his back on that, no matter what Victor offered him. With a newfound sense of clarity and conviction, Liam looked Victor squarely in the eye and delivered his answer. He told him that he would never betray Maya or the movement that she had built, and that no amount of money or power could ever convince him to do so. As he turned to leave, Liam felt a sense of pride and determination welling up inside him. He knew that he had made the right decision, and that he would stand with Maya and his community no matter what challenges lay ahead. Upon returning to Maya, Liam confessed everything about his meeting with Victor, holding nothing back. Though disappointed by Victor's attempts to undermine their work, Maya was heartened by Liam's unwavering loyalty and commitment to their cause. Together, they began to formulate a plan to expose Victor's corruption once and for all, knowing that it would be the fight of their lives. But with the love and support of the community behind them, they knew that anything was possible. The morning of the final confrontation dawned cold and gray, a fitting backdrop for the momentous events that were about to unfold. Maya and her team had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence and building a case that would expose the full extent of Victor Warren's corruption and abuse of power. As they made their way through the streets of the financial district, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. She knew that they were up against a formidable opponent, a man who had spent his entire life accumulating wealth and influence at the expense of others. But she also knew that they had truth on their side, and the courage to speak it no matter the cost. Liam walked beside her, his face set with determination. In the days since his fateful meeting with Victor, he had thrown himself into the work of the movement with renewed vigor, driven by a sense of purpose that he had never known before. As they approached the gleaming tower that housed Victor's empire, Maya took a moment to gather her thoughts. She thought back to that first encounter with Victor in the alleyway, remembering the fear and anger that had coursed through her veins. But she also remembered the strength and resilience of the young man she had saved that night, and the countless others like him who had been beaten down by a system that cared only for profit and power. With a deep breath, Maya pushed open the doors of the building and strode inside, Liam and the rest of her team close behind. They made their way through the lobby, ignoring the startled looks of the employees who scurried out of their way. As they burst into Victor's office, they were met with a scene of chaos. Papers were strewn across the floor, and Victor sat hunched over his desk, his face twisted with rage and desperation. He looked up as Maya and her team entered, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and defiance. For a moment, the two sides stared each other down, the tension in the room almost palpable. Then Maya stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong. She laid out the evidence they had gathered, detailing the years of corruption and abuse that Victor had perpetrated. She spoke of the lives he had ruined, the communities he had destroyed in his relentless pursuit of wealth and power. As she spoke, Victor seemed to deflate before their eyes, his once imposing figure shrinking into a shell of its former self. He tried to interrupt, to defend himself, but Maya pressed on, her words cutting through his bluster like a knife. Finally, when she had said her piece, Maya turned to Liam, who held out a thick folder filled with documents and recordings. It was the final nail in Victor's coffin, the irrefutable proof of his misdeeds. As the reality of his defeat washed over him, Victor seemed to crumple in on himself, collapsing into his chair. Maya almost felt a pang of pity for him then, watching as the man who had once seemed so invincible was reduced to a mere shadow of himself. But then she remembered the pain and suffering that he had caused, the lives he had destroyed in his pursuit of power. And she knew that this was the only way forward, the only way to build a better world for all. As they left Victor's office, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. They had done it. They had won. But even as she celebrated their victory, she knew that their work was far from over. There was still so much to be done, so many wrongs to be righted. But she also knew that they had something that Victor and his kind would never understand, the power of a community united in love and purpose. And with that knowledge, she stepped out into the world, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the weeks and months that followed Victor Warren's downfall, the city underwent a transformation that few could have predicted. With the corruption and greed of the old order laid bare for all to see, a new spirit of hope and possibility began to take hold, spreading like wildfire through the streets and neighborhoods. Maya and her team worked tirelessly to build on the momentum of their victory, pouring their hearts and souls into the task of creating a more just and equitable society. They reached out to communities that had long been ignored and marginalized, listening to their needs and concerns, and working together to find solutions. In every corner of the city, people began to come together in ways they never had before. Neighbors who had once been strangers became friends, bonding over shared struggles and dreams. Young people who had once felt hopeless and disconnected found new purpose and direction, inspired by the example of Maya and her team. Slowly but surely, the city began to heal, its wounds mending under the gentle touch of compassion and kindness. The community gardens that had once been small oases of green began to spread, transforming entire neighborhoods into vibrant, thriving ecosystems. The collective shops that had once been lifelines for the struggling and the forgotten became hubs of activity and innovation, incubating new ideas and enterprises that promised to change the world. And through it all, Maya was there, a beacon of hope and inspiration to all who knew her. She worked tirelessly, often late into the night, driven by a fierce determination to build a better world for all. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be setbacks and challenges at every turn. But she also knew that they had something that no one could ever take away, the love and resilience of a community that had been forged in the fires of struggle and sacrifice. As she stood before a crowd of supporters on a bright, sunny day, Maya felt a sense of joy and gratitude wash over her. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the people who had become her family and her strength, and she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. With tears streaming down her face, Maya raised her voice in a message of hope and unity, her words ringing out like a clarion call across the city. My friends, my brothers and sisters, we stand here today not as individuals, but as a community united in love and purpose. We have faced great challenges and overcome great obstacles, but we have done so together, with the strength and courage that comes from knowing that we are not alone. Today, we celebrate not just our victory, but the birth of a new world, a world where every person is valued and respected, where every voice is heard and every dream is possible. But even as we celebrate, we know that our work is far from over. There are still so many battles to be fought, so many injustices to be righted. But we also know that we have the power to change the world, one small act of kindness at a time. So let us go forth from this place, armed with the love and resilience that have brought us this far. Let us build a world where everyone has a place and a purpose, where no one is left behind or forgotten. And let us never forget that we are stronger together than we could ever be alone. For in the end, it is the bonds of community that will carry us through, no matter what challenges lie ahead. As the crowd erupted in cheers and applause, Maya felt a sense of hope and possibility that she had never known before. And she knew, with a certainty that came from the depths of her soul, that a new world was indeed possible, if only they had the courage to fight for it.